Hello, everyone.
Hello, guys. So we'll wait several minutes just to give all of our participants and speakers as well a chance to jump in. Please be patient, and we'll start approximately in 5 minutes or so. So yeah, hope you understand. So guys, it's 3 p.m. Ukrainian time and official time for us to begin. So good afternoon, dear colleagues. We are pleased to welcome you to a conference, a roundtable dedicated to issues of interaction between China and the European Union. And this roundtable is organized by the Civil Diplomacy Foundation. And for today, I will be your moderator. My name is Polina Dvornikova. I'm an expert on politics and international relations at the foundation. And today, eminent experts in the field of politics, international relations, geopolitics, and even sociology will speak before you. So to spend our time efficiently, we'll ask you to be active and fully involved in the discussion. Each speaker will take the time to answer your question. So please, if you will have fun, just raise your hands or just drop your question in the chat. And we hope this event will be educational for you and even enlightening in some terms. So for today, I will call for our first speaker, who is Danial Saari, professor of practice and director of Political Studies Center and program leader of International Relations and Economy, specialty of the School of Politics and Law at Almaty Management University, program director at Enactus Kazakhstan. And he will speak for today with the topic regarding China and the European Union. Will liberalism survive in the era of global disruption? And please be very, very interested in this topic, because he was doing a program at Central University with Professor Fukuzawa, and he will also try to reflect on his research. So I hope you will enjoy it. And Daniel, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Can I share the link? Well,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I have it. So hello everyone, and I'm quite grateful to the Civil Diplomacy Foundation, and especially Polina Dvornikova. So let me start my presentation, just a second. So today I'll talk about the cooperation between European Union and China. And my question is whether liberalism will survive in the global turbulence, and what are the impacts of China in collaboration with European Union, and why this question is pretty much important, because of the role of China is quite increasing in the contemporary world. And so the cooperation relates not only European Union, but also other regions. Do you hear me? And also other continents, even Africa and Latin America as well, apart from Asia and Europe. But today we'll focus mainly on European Union and China. So there are quite many possibilities, including innovations, technologies, and the trade ties, and also the initiatives like One Belt and One Road. And there are certain challenges as well. You know, the systems, the government systems are quite different ideologies, and there is always a risk of kind of illiberal influences of China on different aspects. We know that those initiatives are mostly related to trade and economic perspectives, but they also might reflect on some political prospects as well in the future. So there must be kind of a dialogue and kind of cooperation be strengthened for the mutual understanding and mutual benefits for both sides. And I would raise the questions about cooperation between these two partners, European Union and China, and how that reflects on liberal values, and also about what kind of measures can be taken in order to minimize the risk for the minimizing of liberal values. And also, what is the role of global actors in strengthening the liberal order? So let's talk about the expanding of Chinese influence on the European continent. And well, I've studied at Fukuyama Leadership Academy. We've been talking quite a lot about the increasing role of China in the world. Its economic and political, cultural influence is increasing quite strongly, and there are quite many potential challenges the European nations might face. We've been taking, you know, the case of Montenegro, where China was financing, you know, the building of the highway for Montenegro, and that was quite a specific case. So the influence is increasing, while China is one of the largest economically, dynamically developing with galloping speeds. So you may see there are quite many investments, trade ties established with lots of countries, and especially the Belt Road Initiative. So it includes many countries in order to link Europe and China. And this influence makes a certain pressure on European states as well, on international institutions as well. For example, I was making research about water resource management, so related to the rivers that coming from China. And it's the policy of China is mainly based on bilateral relationships. It's most of cases tries to have bilateral rather than multilateral. So it's not trying to have even trilateral relationships. Speaking about the cultural influence, we can see that there is quite a strong export of Chinese cinema of quite a good quality, literature, art. So that might also bring to a certain risk for the uniqueness of European cultures as well. So this is quite a big question for European nations to think. We have to speak about, the restrictions for democratic values, freedom of speech, the expressions of civic society institutions. This is also quite an important stuff related to liberal values of European continent. And there must be kind of a cooperation are constructed for the respect of cultures of both partners, and protection not only political and economic autonomy, but also a cultural one as well. So there must be a balance, yes, for the certain guidelines that are constructed between these partners. So the interests, their values should be respected in cooperation of each other. So respect for the protection of autonomy and integrity as well. So as I have mentioned that the China's rapid economic growth is a certain phenomenon of the 21st century. If we just trace the history, we may see that since the time of Deng Xiaoping, China became quite open for the cooperation with Western world, and it has turned to market economic relationships. Most of the international companies, transnational corporations have moved to China, and China provides most of the products and services to the world. So it's becoming the second largest economy after the United States of America. So it's becoming an important supplier of goods and services for the global markets. And as I mentioned also of the big project of China Belt and Road Initiative. So it was first launched by the president of China, Xi Jinping, in 2013, and it includes lots of countries, and also it includes lots of projects related to roads, to railways, to gas pipelines, and it's quite many, even seaport facilities. It's quite huge, and through these projects, China is able to not only to link China with Europe, but also to spread its influence. And sometimes this spreads of the influence is quite aggressive. I've made research about Angola, our projects, and I've noticed that there were lots of cases even of discrimination related, to it's kind of a project somehow reminds me new colonialism. So this should be also considered as when the interests of China are promoted through such projects. These are not only economic interests. So China is mostly developing the infrastructure projects. They're not so much social. They're not focused for the citizens, level, but for the macro level for the benefit of states, but not for the civil society institutions. So, what are the prospects for development and in regard to relationships and economic cooperation, trade and political interaction and dialogue? So here we may see that cooperation between China and European Union is quite enormous. And China is a big market for European products and services, and also it's seeking, well, in order to make investments in Europe. So the trade between these two partners is growing, and both regions can benefit from the cooperation in the sphere of technologies, innovation, sustainable development, and other areas. But also, political interaction between two represents an important aspect of relationships. So the countries cooperate in the field of global issues, such as climate change, international terrorism, and peaceful management of conflict management. So here we have to think about the effective mechanism for discussing for the negotiations in order to achieve some common interests. In these relationships, we may see that we might also face obstacles and challenges. So in order to somehow avoid disputes and achieve some beneficial conditions, we should continue also, well, to think about the human rights and values. And this is pretty much important. In order to have protection of human rights, we should have transparency in relationships, and the prospects of development between two depends on the willingness of both sides to cooperate. And in these views, I have to focus that the interest should not be only focused on the macro level, but also on the level of the interests of ordinary citizens. So it requires, well, also a dialogue for the integrity in order to achieve some positive results, stability and prosperity for both regions. So what are the challenges, yes, for the liberal values and differences in government systems? So China and European Union nations are pretty different, you know, so we may see that these systems and the system of ideologies are becoming the major challenges in relationships, where European Union countries are mostly based on democracies and liberal values, where Chinese government, which is a communist and pretty much authoritarian, you know, and might, you know, create these differences might create a certain obstacle in the way of respecting human rights and freedoms. It also might concern the role of state and civil society institutions, which are not very strong in China. And also it might concern the way of the liberal models can be spread, and they might face, you know, a certain threat. And some regions, you know, well, they choose development models that give some power to the state. So in China, they have chosen, I mean, they still adhere to a different type of government model, and it's diametrically opposite to the practices of liberal values, and it's important that you know, to be discussed for the achieving a certain balance between respecting cultural differences and promoting universal values such as human rights protection and respect of democratic values, and this kind of challenges, you know, to liberal values may highlight, you know, a need to stimulate an open, impartial dialogue to strengthen international civil society institutions and mitigate some differences, to resolve conflicts, beneficial interactions, in order to achieve the universal, kind of a level of universal principles of human rights and justice. And here I would like just to focus a bit on Francis Fukuyama's influence and the role of liberalism in the model world, and what are the threats and challenges to the liberal order. So Francis Fukuyama is an American political scientist, a famous social philosopher of Japanese origin, but he's purely an American scientist, and he's known for plenty of his works. for example, history, the end of the history, and the last man, liberalism and its contestants, his recent work that was translated to many languages. And in his work, Fukuyama argued that the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War somehow paved the way for the development of global liberal democracies, and it's kind of a triumph of liberal democracy and also economy, market economy, relationships. And his ideas evoked, a wide response and a strong influence that turned out to be the key for understanding liberalism in the modern world. And he was quite, disappointed with the recent changes in both Russia and also China regarding Taiwan, and he's trying to explain that with a strong presence of this authoritarianism in the states, which somehow prevents from the spread of liberalism in this country. So we may say that realism is more practical and more applicable for such states, and so the role of liberalism in the world somehow also is diminishing now, we may see, and it's become one of the dominant political, I would say, economic ideologies in the West. And liberal values such as protection of individual human rights and freedoms, equality, gender equality, and most of them, of course, reflect in the Sustainable Development Goals. And we may say that the situation has dramatically changed since 2022. Liberal democracies have become also the main form of government in some countries, and many have chosen them as their, key platforms for democracy and for their form of government, recognizing the civil rights, civil liberty, freedoms, rule of law, yes. Of course, there is a threat, to liberal order. A number of countries adhere to alternative ideas and models of government, such as authoritarianism and nationalism, socialism. That creates, contradictions and conflict between different systems, like China, Russia, especially North Korea. And some processes, in certain ways, indicate the growth of populist and nationalist tendencies. So they have declared democratic kind of content. Even in the name of some countries, you may see democratic and democracy, but in fact, we have a completely different thing, and the main challenges to the liberal order are the differences in government systems and ideologies, and they serve as a strengthening of their platforms, and also the strengthening and supporting of international institutions might help to overcome differences and conflicts, and might contribute to beneficial interactions based on universal principles of human rights and justice. So here is my conclusion, and so what is needed for an active dialogue and cooperation. There are many different ideas and views and interests in the modern world, and there must be a dialogue for the conflict resolution, and also for finding the common understanding between the countries. The cooperation between the various states and actors is necessary to solve, many global problems such as climate change, terrorism, the problem of refugees, migration. There must be an active cooperation in order to contribute establishment of peace, stability, and development of mutually beneficial relationships, both in economy, in politics, in social fare. And also we need to find a balance between national interests and universal values. So national interests are important for every state and its citizens, and it's necessary to strive for protection of human rights and development of rule of law, justice, transparency. And however, some values such as human rights, freedoms, equality, justice, they also play a certain role in building a harmonious society, but not many follow. and the balance of national interests and universal values can be found in order to achieve the stability in the world. So this is what I wanted to say in my speech, and so here a place for your questions. If you have questions, I would be happy to answer.
Well, for now, I see no raised hands. Maybe it's wise to just dedicate some time for you to answer questions which we have received before the round table. So it's a question from a colleague from Kyiv-Mogilянська University. Is liberalism compatible with the values and practices of emerging powers such as China? And how can this country potentially contribute to the survival of liberalism today?
Could you just repeat it one more time? I've just missed one word.
Yeah, okay. So is liberalism compatible with the values and practices of emerging powers such as China? And how can this country potentially contribute to the survival of liberalism?
Of this what?
Of liberalism? I can type it in a chat. I have it as a message. Yeah.
Yes, that would be very kind of you.
Can you see it?
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, great. That's a question from a colleague from Kyiv-Mogilянська University.
Yes, I think that is possible. That is really possible. I can hypothesize that this kind of contestation and the values and practices related to the spread of liberalism is possible, and that can be contributed through a peaceful kind of cooperation, through some peaceful dialogue, and I think in this way that can work, and China has to see that through some maybe international institutions. Yes, it can be much more possible rather than a lonely state would start presenting that. So I think this contribution can be possible if it would be promoted through multilateral platforms, through international organizations platforms. That would be much more, I would say, efficient.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I guess there is no questions for now. So thank you for.
I can just a bit add that because China has changed its political behavior. If you just see in recent years, well, maybe the last 10 years, we may see that China is quite increasing its political dominance, and its voice has grown a lot.
Yeah, I guess it's quite connected with political and economical issues and its development, I guess, in China.
Thank you for your question.
I have to agree with you on that. So yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude for sharing your insights with us. Your talk was both engaging and informative, and it's obviously provided us with valuable perspective on liberalism question and its perspective from China's and EU points of view. So thank you very much, and we'll move forward towards our next speaker. So The floor is going to the Dmytro Єфремов, Associate Professor of the Department of International Relations on the National University of Kyiv-Mogilянська Academy. So he'll be talking about European and Chinese approaches to peace building. So Mr. Єфремов, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to participate today in this wonderful meeting. In a way, I'm going to continue the discussion which was initiated by Professor Saari. And I also have my own understanding of what are liberal values and what is Chinese approach. But I would like to speak about them in a way of in an application towards peace building in the world, because as far as we stay now in Ukraine, for us it's very hot topic, and we are thinking about how to stop the war and if China or European Union could participate in this process. So here are my presentation. Here is my presentation. Just a moment, I will share it with you. Yeah, I hope you see it. Just a second. So just to understand what is happening and how to elaborate with all those things, I would like to speak about liberal peace, which the idea of which was created in European countries. And this approach, which is called liberal peace, was applied to different conflicts all over the world. And the opposite approach, which is now forged by Chinese, not officials, but more like looking like scholars, but also those scholars are giving their advices to the government. So they also share this vision of the government, and the Chinese approach is called mostly in scientific literature as developmental peace. So by contraposing this European and Chinese approach, I would like to speak about the prospects of who should participate in negotiations and in which way, so to clarify the understanding. So once again, liberal peace is European approach, developmental peace is Chinese approach. And for sure, if we take European approach from the very beginning, the core of it is human rights and security. So all those elements of human rights, like human speech, freedom of travel, freedom of religion, and so on and so on, they are included in this idea. And Europeans are starting their negotiations, their talks about peace from the basic idea that during peace building, you have to restore the human rights and security of those people which suffer from conflict in a particular place or region or country. And for sure, to provide those human rights, democratic government, which is ruled by law and democratic procedures, should be established. And democratic procedures provide this unique opportunity to join conflicting parties in the same place and where they would be represented, like a place to speak, like a parliament. They could be presented by their representatives or by parties and so on. So they start negotiations publicly, and then following these democratic procedures, they can little by little elaborate some approach, some outcome from the conflict. If we understand that this is the way to establish peace, which is liberal approach, I think that we should speak about actors. So from a European point of view, main actors are not just conflicting parties, but also a broad spectrum of participants. They are local groups of interests. They are NGOs. For sure, that is players have their differently. By debating them, by way of negotiations, we can find out the way and accommodate those interests in a way. Yeah, so the next step is economic model, and here we see that if the economy is free, if it is market-oriented, if it is enough liberalized, these type of economic relations can contribute to the equal distribution of resources among conflicting parties, and by this way they can also have some financial basis to get some money and to use those money to promote their interests and present themselves on those public platforms. For sure, this European approach is norms-based. So the basic norm is human rights. Yeah, and the second norm is security guarantees for people. Yeah, and in this way, it is universal type of solution. Yeah, that could be applied to any type of conflict anywhere in the world. If it is like a regional conflict, if it is intra-state conflict between the government and rebellions, if it is a conflict between ethnic groups in some countries or region. So the universal way to solve the conflict is to establish democratic procedures and try to negotiate and accommodate conflicting interests. For sure, each of those parties which are participating in this negotiation process and this restoration of peace, they should preserve some autonomy, especially financial autonomy. They have to have some resources to finance their activities and to protect their interests. And for sure, it is very necessary that each party in the conflict should be recognized as an independent and equal member of negotiations. So sometimes those parties are small, they are big, they differ from place to place, but nevertheless, if you recognize the small differences in these parties which represent different interests, you can invite them to participate in negotiation process. And this approach is the core idea of European, of Western approach to conflicts, and it is oriented to the resolution of the conflict by the rulers and Chinese government, and it is considered as developmental peace. So the main priority of this approach is not human rights, but more like the right for subsistence, or broadly speaking, the right for development. So what Chinese officials say is that they often promote this possibility to have the right for development, have resources for development, and focus all power, all facilities that parties or countries have to focus them on the development. And their basic idea that focusing on this development, we can solve the conflicts as well. So not by democratic procedures, but by promoting economic development. And the idea is looking this way. So there are two conflicting parties. Let's imagine, never mind what is the origin of those parties, but they are in a conflict. So most conflicts are happening around land, resources, water, rights, and so on and so on. So it means that there is an economic basis under their conflict. And if you switch the attention of conflicting parties from the distribution of these basic resources to promotion of economic growth, it could be an alternative to resolve the conflict. So conflicting parties agree to stop the conflict and focus their mutual interests on building economic development. And it's clear that for economic development you need some stabilization, some peace, at least ceasefire, maybe not a peace deal, but ceasefire also would work. And those parties would then be provided some additional aid from abroad, they could increase their possibilities and invest in their economic development. Then they would receive the benefits of economic development, which would be better life, better living conditions, and so on and so on. And by understanding this, they would switch from conflicting to supporting the economic growth. And in this way, it's supposed by Chinese scholars and politicians that conflict would be avoided. Yeah, so here the central role of promotion of such economic development belongs to the government. Why the government? Because first it is officially recognized, then it is relatively powerful and clear what the interests the government can have. And this government have or could have enough power to mobilize resources and focus them not on the provision of livelihood of conflicting parties or interests of conflicting parties, but on the contrary, focus those mobilized resources on the economic development. And for sure, except the state, there are international donors which can provide their money to initiate or initialize this economic development, but the cooperation in the conflicting region should be between donors and state, but not donors and local groups of interests, rebellions, NGOs, and so on and so on. So they give money to the state redistributes those money and promotes economic growth, and this growth stops the conflict. So for sure, if state plays central role, it means that state should be the main coordinator of economic resources and is responsible for supporting a normal economic life. For sure, this approach is more relative, it is more localized. It's hard to understand how to apply it when we are talking about not intrastate conflict, but the conflict between different states, like we have today between Ukraine and Russia. But prerequisite for such developmental peace approach is the sovereignty of the players. They should be restricted from the influence from outside, so they have to have some immunity from foreign donors, and which would promote their interests, their values. Yeah, and also it's necessary to preserve the government ownership over the resources, or at least over the redistribution of those resources. So from here we can see that if we compare developmental peace and liberal peace is more oriented on the conflict resolution, and Chinese approach is more oriented on conflict avoidance. So we escape from conflict. We try not to recognize it, but we try to initiate other different processes which would help us to withdraw from the conflict. So in reality, what is the Chinese approach to conflict resolution is unclear, because if you avoid conflict, it does not mean that you resolve the conflict. That is why it's hard to speak whether China could become a real participant in future negotiations about Ukraine, about the peace in Ukraine, and whether we should invite China to be such a party in the conflict. So those are my main thoughts. Thank you for your attention, and if I would love to be answering the questions, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Єфремов. For now, I see no questions. Ms. Nikorchuk, please.
Yes, thank you. So I want to say thank you for this really interesting presentation. And I want to talk about something like China always talks about economic development, cooperation, but it's also this economic development is like strong tool of political influence for China also. And we see this, for example, with Africa, some situations with Ukraine. And my question is, at what level is relatively safe for Europe, for Ukraine to cooperate with China and build peace? Because their approach, yes, liberal and development to building peace is different. Is there any common ground they can find?
Let's imagine the situation when China is approaching and trying to participate in the conflict resolution in Ukraine. For sure, China would not publish or would not issue some political statements. They would not ask to share some values. The one value they would recognize, and it is recognized, is the sovereignty of countries. If we take precisely Ukrainian case, we see that another question that China is worried about is to take into considerations the interests of all parties and consider security interests of Russian Federation. And this means that they try intentionally to blur this political part of conflict resolution and, on the contrary, stress on the economic part of conflict resolution. And here it's a question if China should be invited or allowed to participate in the reconstruction in Ukraine after the war. Because the evidence shows that in other conflicts, Chinese prefer not to participate in multilateral reconstruction projects, but mostly bilateral. So they come and negotiate directly with the government if they can participate, and what are the conditions of their participation. So it would be different, and I think it's not necessary to expect that Chinese would ask for some political steps or values to be published.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I see no questions. I see pleasant comments from Danial Saari. He's also supporting the ideas of Mr. Єфремов, which is great.
Thank you, Professor Saari.
On behalf of the roundtable participants and our foundation, I would like to express for the topic was evident, and it made for a truly rewarding experience for everyone present. So thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with us. And we will move forward with our next expert. So for today, it will be Dr. Hui-Chun Liu, Research Associate at the Center of Taiwan Studies at Seoul's University of London. She conducted PhD and postdoctoral research projects in human geography in order to theorize the geopolitics of political economy, and particularly in China's context at global scale. And she will talk for today with the topic, how does China's information war influence Taiwan's public opinion? And Dr. Hui-Chun Liu, the floor is yours. You can go.
I hope you can all hear me. Yeah, okay, excellent. Yeah. So, okay, good afternoon, everyone. So it's my pleasure to share this presentation and participate in this roundtable discussion with you guys. And today, my presentation topic is how does China's information warfare influence Taiwan's public opinion? And thanks again for inviting me. But I think my topic is not fully compatible with the topic of the roundtable. It's about China EU relations. But when I was asked to join this panel, they say I can share whatever I want. So because I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on China-EU relations, so instead of sharing this, I chose to share the like how the Chinese information war influenced Taiwan. Yeah, okay, so before I move on to the my presentation, this is what I'm gonna to structure my presentation. So my presentation will be divided into 4 parts. So I will start with a brief introduction of what is information warfare and how has Chinese government done to influence Taiwanese public opinion, and it's followed by the next part, that is what are impacts and challenges for Taiwan's democracy and society, and the last part will talk about like how Taiwanese government can do and how has it done so far. Yeah, okay. So I think this issue, this like topic, why this topic is so important, because Taiwan is at the front line of China's information warfare, particularly in recent years. So traditionally, like information warfare is not a new idea, but it's like it's been like initiated for a long time, and it is intended to get access to information, control all that, and most importantly, to manipulate it against adversaries such as cyber attack. But in Taiwan, like we normally call information warfare as cognitive warfare or influence warfare. So it's meant to like shape people's perception, governmental decision making, and to influence voting behaviors, also to shape the people's understanding of international relations. So it touched like a wide range of topics, not only domestic issues, like elections, and even more like the foreign policies. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some example to explain why this topic is so important. Okay, yeah, so I think like the China's playbook is to learn from Russia against the Ukraine, but it's slightly different because it's more complicated and China is richer than Russia. So it has multiple resources to make use. So first, I think the element of the China's cognitive warfare against Taiwan includes hybrid tactics. So when I say hybrid tactics, it means like this attack or this information spreading. This information spreading is initiated by the centralized command. So, but it also like very decentralized. That means involve like multiple local enablers. So that's why I call it like decentralized tactics. But not only state actors involved in this warfare, but like private companies or the paid influence also involved, and even like locals like local participants also play a very important part in China's warfare. So I would say like multiple, it starts with like a centralized initiative, including military, propaganda, United Front organizations, but it also involve the indirect involvement of local collaborators. When I say indirect involvement, what does it mean? It means like sometimes like a local enabler doesn't, like they are not aware of this information they are spreading actually is it's influenced by China's warfare. Yeah, they are not aware of this. So, and also like some religious groups, gangsters, local authorities, they are also like participate in this spreading of this information, but probably they are not aware of this. Yeah, so it's really hard to detect. Also, it's really hard to counterattack. Yeah, And also, I think the final element I want to raise is in China's cognitive warfare also involve like online, offline efforts. When we say online, you say like most disinformation is spread on social media, broadcast, and also like Taiwan's. I think like Taiwanese tend to use a specific messenger software called Line. The Line is like WhatsApp, and it has like a lot of enclosed message groups. So like the false news or fake news is easily spread on these enclosed social groups. But we call it like offline efforts. Why? Because because like, for example, like United Front organizations are meant to network with local people, with like grassroots organizations or religious groups organizations. So they have lots of, they have a close connections with Taiwanese common people. So all of this, like disinformation, also spread among these grassroots civil servants in Taiwan, or like grassroots elected representative in Taiwan, or taxi drivers. Yeah, so we call it like why it is so difficult to counter China's information war is because it's like it involves multiple state actor and non-state actors also. Yeah. And like local people, yeah. So I want to give you an example, like when Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan last year, so as you can see, the 7-Eleven is a convenience supermarket. So in the middle of the store, normally there's a digital signage displayed showed promotion deals. But like it was after her visit to Taiwan, immediately the hackers hackers attack the display and showing the war seller Pelosi get out of Taiwan. So it's like deliver very malicious message. And also not just this, on the same day, like this digital signage was hacked in a major train station. So it's a simplified Chinese. It's not commonly used in Taiwan, but it says like, an old waitress visit to Taiwan is provoking as a threat to China's sovereignty over Taiwan. Those who greet her will face final judgment after their death. So we with ethnic bonds shall not be cut off. The great Han people will be reunited again one day. So it's a very strong and a very like malicious message delivered on the same day, yeah, when Pelosi visited Taiwan. So what that means, I think this is not like disinformation. This is like cyber attack that ends to war against Taiwan by delivering this message. Yeah, but also like governmental website were also attacked. Yeah, so they want to deliver what kind of message did they want to deliver? I think the first is Taiwan is not a country, and Taiwan is not supposed to build a close tie with the US. So since then, as Taiwan and the US has some collaborations in military and in trade, I think it is like China is really cautious about like the closer Taiwan-US collaboration. So it is hard to like spread skepticism about US in Taiwan. So that's the headline on the Economist in September this year. Says China is flooding Taiwan with this information, but I think it's not new. And what has the Chinese government done to achieve this goal? For example, this is a very like classic example because it's a very popular news. It's called UDN. it fabricate news about the U.S. Request Taiwanese cooperation in the making of biological weapon in Taiwan, but so the newspaper faked an official document, as you can see on this presentation, on this slide. It so the U.S. and Taiwan cooperated in a biological war to fight against China. So both Taiwan and the U.S. government denied this, but a current government official claimed that this allegation from the UD and from the newspaper was untrue. Yeah, because there was no name such as like a South China Sea meeting, but it is like in this newspaper it showed like fake official documents. Yeah, so it's like it happened in Taiwan like every day. Okay, sorry, I think I'm gonna skip this. And so so why does China has done this? I think its motivation is to intervene in Taiwan's elections, obvious, because it wants to like help or privilege politicians who it favors. So it will support specific candidates, like in 2020, like in 2018, yeah, it supports former Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-yu through paid advertising on YouTube and Facebook. And also it wanted to shape Taiwanese public opinion. So it wants to influence Taiwanese perceptions of domestic issue and foreign policies. Okay, but I think before and what the implication of this, the manipulation of information. So as we, when it comes to disinformation, I'm not so sure if you know the definition of disinformation. It normally refers to false information. That means the information is not true. But as a Taiwan's case, we can see like this information is not necessarily untrue. Sometimes the most effective way to shape public opinion is to add some facts to make information more convincing. Yeah, so this really interesting is like totally against the conventional wisdom. And I think this is intended to redirect Taiwanese to think a way that serves the interest of China. So as I said, like the China is keen to spread skepticism about the US. As I've given you an example, like the Taiwan and the US collaborated to make biological weapon to fight against China, which is proved untrue. But also like besides this, yeah, I would like to talk about normally we'll like categorize China's cognitive war into 4 models, and obviously like a local enabling model and the content file model is more effective than like the propaganda and like a little pinky model. So because like China has invested a lot of money on like making publicity through, for example, through like hire foreign influencers to tell China stories. Yeah. And also, for example, they hired like what they call like netizens. Yeah, or we call it like 5 cents, because they will be paid to 5 cents RMB if they endorse, if they spread China's narratives. So it's like it's like the, I wouldn't say it's a public-private partnership, but it's basically like China's invested a lot of money to do this like publicity campaigns, but actually Taiwan, I think it's more delicate. The efforts are more delicate because, as I said, like local enablers make efforts to spread and or like or to be involved in this campaign. And also, once you clicked like an article, video, or like an image on the Facebook, YouTube, and what else? TikTok. Yeah. So like the algorithm will make it like this information spread widely because they thought the algorithm will thought like, yeah, you are interested in this content, they will feed you more like similar contents. Yeah, so that's why like algorithm owned by these tech companies make things worse. Yeah. So how the Taiwanese government has been done. Yeah, I want to talk about this. So so far, I think Taiwanese because I probably don't have much time to talk about this. Sorry, I'm not so sure if I can like how much time I have talked so far because I was like requested I can speak for about 25 minutes. I'm not so sure if I'm like already talked for a bit long.
Rachel, you can continue. Just like bear in mind that you'll also have a Q&A session. So
okay.
If it's fine with you, you can wrap it up now. But we're fine to continue listening to you. So.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think I've been nervous, so I forgot like to count how long I have been talking. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah. Okay. I would like to like. I'm happy to share a bit more. Yeah. For example, I think there's another very interesting example is like the death of a Taiwanese diplomat. There's also an accident because in 2018, PPT is like the biggest bulletin system. It's like a Reddit in the US, so it's quite like popular among younger generations. PPT users revealed like the Chinese government sent a shuttle bus to pick up Chinese tourists stranded at Kansai airport in Japan after storm hit Japan. So the users also criticized the government of Taiwan of doing nothing to help Taiwanese tourists. But actually, the source of a fake news is a Chinese TV tourist article on Weibo. Yeah, so it's like the source of fake news is originated from China's social media. Yeah, but it was cited on the Taiwan small group bulletin system. But like because the BBT has a reputation of independence, so like it was regarded credible. Yeah, so like the journalists or TV news like to cite the source of the information from PTT anonymous opinions. Yeah, so that's why without further investigation, news outlet cited this article from PPT and circulate widely. So eventually it's like dramatically caused a Taiwanese diplomat to take his life under pressure because he was criticized of like doing nothing to help Taiwanese tourists. Yeah, there is a very like extreme case. And also like in COVID, like at the outset of the COVID-19, you can see like China actually is really good at making narratives to help it's like to maintain its image. I would say to maintain its image in a positive way. So when the virus started to like the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan, but like the Chinese government started to spread narratives saying COVID-19 actually is not lethal and it's just a flu. So, but when it got worse, I mean, when the Wuhan's case seems out of control, and the Chinese government started to spread disinformation in Taiwan, including like social media or broadcast media, saying its origin could be traced back to the participation of the U.S. soldiers in the military war again in Wuhan in the fall of 2019. Actually, like the outbreak in Wuhan was 2020. Yeah, just a few months later. So, and there was belief that the China think this is because the U.S. deliberately spread the COVID viruses made in the lab into Wuhan. Yeah, so it's like really like in Taiwan, like we like absorb this information every day, basically every day. Yeah. Okay, so as you can notice, like actually this information is quite harmful to our democracy, and they also try to damage the reputation of the government to make people unlikely to believe the government, to lose trust in the government, and also it like making people tend to believe what they want to believe rather than based on the truth. And also you will make the society more divided and polarized, as we can see, like I think like every country has this concern, has similar concern, just how we deal, how does the government deal with the disinformation, yeah, to protect our democracy. Yeah. Okay. So I think that Taiwan is not exceptional. Yeah. And how has Taiwanese government addressed these issues? Of course, like Taiwanese took some actions. For example, the first one is to establish the official communication outlets to clear doubts, to clarify when like this information has been widely circulated online, and also like it tried to reinforce regulations. For example, you will punish people who spread fake news or misinformation online, or he will revoke licensing to like some notorious news outlets that like deliberately spread disinformation. Yeah, but like revoking the license or punish people who spread fake news didn't work quite well, because the government has been criticized of constraining freedom of speech. Yeah, so now they are quite careful to deal with this. So I think the Taiwanese government is facing a dilemma that is like how to strike a balance between freedom of speech and crackdown fake news. So, and also it's really hard to regulate social media platforms, because when like this information or videos went viral, but sometimes you don't know who made these videos or who donate influencers to make this video. Yeah, so I think it is like very difficult to investigate how they are funded, how these influencers are funded, and who funds them. So sometimes you have to like trace back where the sources of funding is from. So it's not easy. Yeah, so that's what I try to like give, or like to give some suggestions to the Taiwanese government. I think the first thing I would say is to improve the digital literacy through education. Yeah, so it's surprisingly like who are most susceptible to face fake news or disinformation is people who are politically indifferent. Yeah, so like politically neutral voters are most susceptible because they are not aware Taiwan is at the front of the disinformation warfare from abroad. They would rather believe the Taiwanese government is the only the only outlet who will make this information is an irony. Yeah, so because of this, though, like these people lack motivation to check if the information they receive is correct or false. So, but like people is like we have a lot of information to browse online. Sometimes we lack of like attention to track the information we receive is true or not. Yeah. But so I think the first task we can improve, like we can work on, is to improve digital literacy through education. And the second, I think it's really important. That's how we can like learn from US and Australia's case. That is to legalize, to make social media companies like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube more accountable for their content. Yeah, so they are. I think they are. We should request these social media companies, these tech companies, to be obliged to reveal information. I think this way is better than like punishment. Yeah. So for example, like if this like a video is paid social, and I think like in the US and Australia, like YouTube has to reveal who donate or who offer the funds to make this video. I think revealing this information is like the first step to identify like who pay for this video, who pay for make this video, so that we can that we are able to, like users are able to believe, to choose what they're gonna believe or not. Yeah, so I think like my presentation ends here. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments from the audience. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. I see Elena Monovian is having a question. So please, Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the lecture. I actually study international relations, and I'm very interested in East Asia region and Taiwan specifically. And I actually have similar questions to you. So the first one is that I know that right now we have kind of like two main political forces in Taiwan, which is Minju Dang, which is a party of the current leader Tsai Ing-wen, and we also have Kuomintang. And I was actually surprised when when I see some representative from Kuomintang at some point, if I'm not mistaken, like near the elections, they organized some meetings with the mainland China officials, and they actually tried to use the message to justify it as something as conflict avoiding and peacemaking process. And I was very surprised about this dialogue, and understand that part of its roots in ideology of the parties, when the Democratic Progressive Party is more on Taiwanization and the self-identity of Taiwan as a single independent state, and Kuomintang is still supportive of like one China. But still, your lecture actually makes me wonder if, for example, the electorate of Kuomintang is more vulnerable to disinformation, or have the representative of this opposition and party have ever like participate in like spreading misinformation, disinformation, which is very connected to China, so to say.
Okay. Thank you for your question. So I'm not so sure if I like misunderstood your question. Your question is like the KNT pro-China parties supporters are more vulnerable and more susceptible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think okay, I would say yes. Yeah. And because they have more connections with China. For example, what I say, like religious groups have connections with United Front organizations that are based in China. So they will like have regular visits to China, and also like older generations in Taiwan seem to be like traditional supporters of KNT. They are KNT voters. But this group is quite interesting. It consists of like Taiwanese business people who invest a lot in China, also soldiers, like civil servants and teachers, because I think their ideology is more like traditional. They would like admire like one party authoritarianism, so they don't like DPP because they probably don't like believe or don't have a trust in a democratic regime. Yeah, so yeah, but I think another surprising fact is like politically neutral voters are also susceptible to this information. Yeah, and also like so like it's not. I think like they are not like. It's really hard to address this because you will find like every topic can be a target of disinformation attack, including eggs, including the prices of eggs, vegetables. And I think like it worked quite well because people are concerned about this, because this about how they manage their everyday life. When they found like eggs become so expensive, they can't afford to have eggs every day, they will complain about government. They will think because government wasn't able to deal with these minor matters. So yeah, there's another like this information practice also about like eggs, how the government did like address the egg issue, egg shortages. Yeah, so what I'm gonna say is just, yeah, I think like because Taiwan is also very new democratic regime. Yeah, so so probably people have like a higher expectation of what government can do actually, because our voting rate is really high. It's like I think in the last presidential election, our voting rate is nearly like 75%. So people are really engaged in politics. People are enthusiastic about discussing politics. That's why like information is so prevalent. Yeah, because people like to share, would like to talk about who's their like ideal candidates, who is the like qualified politician that can solve any problem they might have encountered in their everyday life. Yeah, so yeah, I hope I answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And my next question is regarding, we noticed that a lot of course, disinformation messages spread by China is like very anti-Americanistic, anti-USA, and they try to like kind of break the bond between the US and Taiwan. And I would like to ask about the relations with the other country, which is Japan, because I think that in region, Japan is like they also kind of like the confronting force for China. And you mentioned like the food block, such for example, when they ban the import of Taiwanese fruits to China, and it's affected the economy very much, but Japan stood up for Taiwan and they helped them kind of like survive that and increase the import to Japan instead. And I would like to ask if like some Chinese, mainland Chinese disinformation is aiming to like discredit Japan and relations with Japan, and like perhaps exploits like the historical issues with Japan, something like that.
Okay, can you like say again? I'm not so. I don't know what your question is.
So yeah, is Chinese propaganda in Taiwan also? I mean, not only against US but also against Japan, to discredit like Chinese-Taiwanese relations.
Yeah, but like so far, I think the efforts against Japan are not very successful. I mean, like this information campaign against Japan wasn't successful. Also, I think because Japan is not like openly a very stern supporter of Taiwan's in terms of diplomacy. I think the US is more like major alliance that Taiwan wants to build a connection with. So, and I think like, and also like, because like Taiwanese has a really positive views on Japanese. So I think when, I don't know, because I have no idea how they set up agenda. For example, I have no idea like how the Chinese government set up agenda and what is the agenda. How I mean like how this like this information agendas were decided. It's a black box. You know what I mean? Because we can only it's just really, you don't know like why they pick US instead of Japan. They probably think like because the US is a major target, it's like easy target. Yeah, and it's I think it is really good questions of why did they choose US and not Japan. And I guess also, the Japanese and Taiwanese have like very close relationship and very complex relationship due to its past history. Yeah, so like Japan once colonized Taiwan for 50 years. Yeah, but like Taiwanese are still like fond of Japan. Yeah, so I don't know. And and also, I guess like it's probably because we all speak Mandarin. I mean, like Taiwanese and Chinese all speak Mandarin. So because of the language, so you are also like, I think like it's quite easy to spread misinformation. And I think like probably like most of Taiwanese don't know much about US because of the geographical distance. Yeah, so it's really hard to know what's going on in the US. Yeah, so it has a room for like over this disinformation about the US. Yeah. Okay. So that's my wild guess. I don't know the answer.
Thank you. And my last question is the place of Ukrainian-Russian war in this disinformation campaign. Have China tried really hard to like shift the blame from the conflict to US in the eyes of Taiwanese and therefore discredit US? And have they been successful in that? Because as far now, I think the Taiwanese people, it's like in majority of them is very supportive of Ukraine and all of this, but have they tried to like, is there some sort of frustration of misinformation regarding that?
Okay, thank you for the questions. It's really good questions. They're very interesting. Like I think I would say like Taiwanese public opinion landscape is quite divided. It's polarized, even though like I think like in my social bubble, like most people support Ukraine instead of Russia. But I think it's like last month ago, and there are 4 scholars who signed a petition to urge Taiwanese people not to fight against China, just in case a war happens, because they want to make peace. They want to have like peaceful solution for possible like Taiwan-China war. And the reason is like don't get involved in war, initiated by US, because the US is an empire and they would like to encourage people to get involved in the war. So that's why the Russia-Ukraine war happened. So they blame Russia-Ukraine war for US effort. They think because because of like the eastern expansion of NATO is a cause of the Russian-Ukraine war. So they applied this, they compared this to China-Taiwan war. So to their idea is to encourage Taiwanese people, to convince the Taiwanese people not to believe what the US government said. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. And they say they are not China, they are not pro-China. Yeah, but they don't want to see Taiwan to become Ukraine, to become a pawn of like a two superpower. Yeah. So it's I think it is really quite interesting, and it also really like popular among older generations. Yeah, so you will see like there's a huge divide of in terms of like public opinions. Like older generations like have a more skepticism about the US, yeah, than younger generations. Yeah. So in terms of,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And we also have another question. During the meeting with Joe Biden yesterday, Xi Jinping said that China isn't going to attack Taiwan in the coming years. What do you think this means? Like, has China abandoned the option of a military takeover of Taiwan? Or is this a signal that informational war will continue?
Can you say again? I missed like the first few sentences you have said.
Yeah, of course.
What happened yesterday?
During the meeting with Joe Biden yesterday, Xi Jinping said that China is not going to attack Taiwan in the upcoming years. So what do you think it's mean? Like, has China abandoned the option of a military takeover of Taiwan itself?
Okay.
Or is it a signal that they're planning to continue informational war?
Okay, thank you for your questions. Because I think like today the Xi Jinping president, China's president Xi Jinping met the US President Biden. Yeah, so probably he intended to be nice. Yeah, so just like we wouldn't attack Taiwan, but I think like China's even though like people think like China's foreign policies are more aggressive in recent years, but in terms of its Taiwan policies, I think it's quite consistent, unless Taiwan declares independence. Yeah, it would then take over Taiwan by force. Yeah, but you will try to like push Taiwan to its defense limits. So there's a lot of like military practices happening around Taiwan, and but I think like China is always active to prepare for war if they think they need it. But and also like US has warned Taiwanese society not to be naive, not to be innocent, because as you can see how Taiwanese society responded Pelosi's visits in Taiwan, you will be surprised. Taiwanese were quite chilled when Pelosi visited Taiwan. But I was in the UK last year, so many like British friends asked, is a war gonna happen soon? They are worried about this. They are much more worried than Taiwanese, because like China has said for like 40 years, say they're gonna attack Taiwan, they're gonna take over Taiwan if Taiwan declares independence through like referendums. Yeah, so I don't see this like this and I'm also I couldn't guarantee like China will learn from Russia. Yeah, like to attack Taiwan without a justification. I wouldn't say it's not possible to happen. Yeah, but I would say like its policy is quite consistent. It would like to follow Hong Kong's model through a peaceful agreement to ask Taiwan to abandon some to disarm Taiwan, or and to guarantee Taiwan still enjoy like economic freedom and Taiwan still can elect its leader. But just look at Hong Kong. Yeah, so these promises are probably like sugar-coated promises. Yeah, but like because of like this military threats are quite useful for some people. So they might be afraid if Taiwan is gonna elect a like pro-independence party president like next year. So we are gonna suffer from like these military threats, and people don't want to see it happen. So might be, yeah, the political landscape might be changed, because as is known, like Taiwan also have like other political parties that want to sign peaceful agreements with China to settle down this like sovereignty issues. Yeah. So yeah, so it's up in the air. So like, but I think like for Taiwan, it's like the best defense. It just, I don't know, like to defend yourself. Yeah, and also I think to make alliances with countries with similar values, like we all like value freedom, democracy, so you have to speak for yourself. And I think they probably they are more like more effective to defend the Taiwan's democracy. Yeah, to protect Taiwan's democracy, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a valuable contributor to the roundtable discussion, and for helping us better understand the complexity of informational policy of China. It is, I guess, it's a critical field, and wish you all the best in all your future endeavors. And I hope to see our future collaboration. And we'll move forward to our next speaker for today, and the last one. So the floor is going to the Ihor Litvin, Ambassador Extraordinary of Ukraine during the 1998 till 2001, and he's also co-chairman of the Ukrainian Chinese Business Council. And I guess you will all enjoy his speech, since he's quite elementary professional in this area. So, Mr. Litvin, the floor is yours. Please. Microphone. Sorry, microphone. Switch on your microphone.
Now, okay?
Yeah. Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, good day to everybody. The fast developing relationship between China and Europe has become one of the most important in international affairs, and China-Europe relations take an innovative and insightful look at this phenomenon, taking into account the state of Chinese studies in Europe and European studies in China, the decision-making behind the US, China, European Union's China policy, and what the Chinese perception and assessment are of Europe that shape China's Europe policy, the recent rapid growth of bilateral commercial and technological relations, and the global context of the bilateral Sino-European relationship, or in particular, the interaction of China, the United States, and Europe. And finally, the prospects for the future evolution of this relationship. As you know, we do face anti-China sentiments in Europe, which have been rising in recent years, not just among European leaders, but also among ordinary people. It is hard for many people to understand why the Western attitude toward China has become so much worse. Different reasons are cited at different times. President Xi Jinping's autocracy, Chinese diplomats behaving like a wolf warriors, alleged genocide in Xinjiang, introduction of the national security law in Hong Kong, threats against Taiwan, excessive territorial claims in the South China Sea, spying, unfair treatment of foreign companies in China, theft of intellectual property, unfair trading practices, the baleful influence of Confucius Institutes, hiding information about the origin of COVID. The list goes on. The most recent is probably China's refusal to condemn Russia for its invasion of Ukraine and its persistence in being friendly to Russia. While each grievance is worthy of discussion and debate, we should also know that China has its own grievances against the West. Chinese leaders and many Chinese people believe that underlying Western negativism towards China is an unwillingness to accept China as an equal and a desire to pull China down, if possible. We have to remember slightly the history. 1842, Treaty of Nanjing, treaty that ended the First Opium War, the first of the unequal treaties between China and foreign imperialist powers. China paid the British reparation, ceded the territory of Hong Kong, and agreed to establish a fair and reasonable tariff. British merchants, who had previously been allowed to trade only at Guangzhou, which is now the capital of Guangdong province, were now permitted to trade at 5 treaty ports and with whomever they please. Repeated hostile statements made by the G7 countries remind the Chinese of the aggression of the 8-nation alliance, which included Germany, Japan, Russia, the strategic partner of China now, Britain, France, the United States, Italy, and Austrian-Hungarian Empire that invaded China in 19 to put down the Boxer Rebellion. China has historically had an environment that consists mainly of outright enemies like Japan, or not very pleasant neighbors like India, or ungrateful friends like Vietnam. In a situation where this is compounded by a threat, and indeed a very serious one for China, a planetary one, in the form of this Australia, UK, US grouping, China is in a difficult position of physical survival as a country. China is big and strong, but in that part of the world, it is actually alone against everyone. And it has to think about its defense over himself. After suffering for decades at the hands of Western powers and Japan, China's leaders and people are determined to stand up to the West, in particular to the US. Importantly, however, China does not see Europe as an enemy, and is certainly not an enemy of Europe. And China-Europe relations are critical to the world peace. We have to understand that China is an unusually homogeneous country. More than 92% of its population is Han. There is no comparable nationality in the world, nor in the past, not now, which is that huge numbers share a common culture and civilization. China's population is almost twice that of the European Union. Unlike the European Union, which is in my mind remains a confederation of tribal nations, the Han people have only one literature and acknowledge of the same heroes. India's population has overtaken China. but it does not have China's homogeneity. It is perhaps more like Europe in its diversity. China's homogeneity did not happen by chance, but neither was it's the result of particular policy decisions. Han rulers for millennia have found it difficult to govern non-Han people because they behave differently. It is not for this reason that China's instinct is always to build walls around itself, not to keep its people, but to keep foreigners out. The Chinese national anthem talks about rebuilding Great Walls. China builds walls for everything, not just physical walls, walls for the capital flows, cultural imports, foreign movies, educational material, cyberplace, and as we saw recently, bacteria and viruses. It is very important to understand what are the relations between Europe and China in respect of multipolarity, including Russian war against Ukraine. Seems that some European leaders today support US pressure on China without careful consideration of China's nature or of Europe's own vital interests. This is a matter of war and peace. Europe's stance can tilt the balance in US-China relations either way. Europe must naturally calculate in its own self-interest. The transatlantic alliance is based on a common civilization interhering. NATO establishes the security framework for the European Union to flourish. Without it, the long peace in Europe following the end of the Second World War would not have been possible at all. According to the European opinion, that peace has now been shattered, but could get much worse if Russia, which spans 11 time zones, breaks up. We in Ukraine, we see it very good future for Russia. If that happens, they think in Europe, there will be a disorder in Eurasia for decades. China may then be forced to move and may decide to reclaim land it lost when it was weak. This would not be a good outcome for Europe, for sure. Looking forward, Europe has to decide how it wants to live with Russia as a neighbor. There is naturally a range of views. In the end, Europe has to decide its own position while preserving the essence of the transatlantic alliance. The danger of Europe is that a prolonged standoff in Ukraine will undo the careful consensus that had created the Europe of today. China's close relationship with Russia was expected because both have come under great pressure from the US. They are not natural friends. They were close to nuclear war in the 60s and early 70s. Today, Russia needs China, and China does not want to see Russia defeated. It is not realistic to hope or expect China to condemn Russia and support the West in Ukraine. China does not want to support Russia in the war. This is not China's war. We have to understand this. And Russia has to understand it. China will play an important role in helping to create conditions for an end to the Russian war against Ukraine. The time is not yet right. At that point, China's current intermediate position between Europe and Russia may become helpful. China can only be effective with European support. The US, however, would not like to see China playing such a role. If we take China-Europe into relations, we have to understand that there is a Taiwan issue, which is the critical one for this relationship. The sense of the past in Chinese society makes its culture highly conservative. The Chinese, like many other East Asian peoples, have a certain mental trait. They always remember the good and always remember the evil. Its actions today shouldn't be measured against Western norms. Consider this misunderstanding of Taiwan. If you remember, in 16th century, the Portuguese sailed past Taiwan and named this island Formosa, the beautiful. In 17th century, Taiwan came under the control of the Dutch from East India Company. Later, a bit later, Spain sent its warships to Taiwan and managed to gain a foothold in the northern part of the island. The struggle for possession of Taiwan between Holland and Spain ended in favor of Spain in 1642. In 1655, a great uprising of the Chinese population and the Aborigines broke out against the Dutch colonizers. Then this ended again by the victory of East India Company. In 19th century, the European powers in Japan carved out pieces of territory for themselves from a declining China's dynasty of Qin. Hong Kong was lost in 1842 after the Opium War. In 1862, all ships arriving at ports of the China coast and up to the Yangtze River were inspected mostly by the British, who, after deducing they have claimed for themselves, gave the remainder of the Chinese government. You see, when European leaders take positions on Taiwan that disregard Chinese history, it irritates China and serves no strategic purpose. For China, the issue of Taiwan is not a play of words or protocol niceties. It is about historical justice. China believes that its claim on Taiwan has a stronger legal basis than many countries' sovereignty or territorial claims. I repeat once again, Taiwan is the key issue in Europe-China relations. Another thing is to understand what are the needs for Europe in the context of US-China relations. There is a big need for Europe to stabilize these relations. The crystallization of a multipolar world is inevitable. If the US tries to maintain global dominance, I fear it will exhaust itself. We should not be surprised with that Russia, China, India, and a number of other countries are actively working to reduce the world dependence on the US dollar and the US-controlled global financial system. When the US dollar loses its dominance, a great flight will turn in opposite direction with huge consequences for every region. It is better for the US to shape multipolarity as it's crystallizing and be primus inter pares. That is completely achievable. China cannot be first among equals because of the nature of its culture. Neither Europe nor India. The US has a culture suited for multipolarity, although we can't openly admit it to some extent. The culture that binds the European Union together and the culture that binds ASEAN countries together are both American derived. It is therefore in Europe's interest to help bring about a multipolar world with the US as the first among equals. China and Russia won't like it, but no, there is no alternative. We have also to understand that Europe's role in shaping such an outcome is decisive. Europe can either fuel American desire for perpetual global dominance, or it can force on the US a more realistic agenda. On China, Europe should take its own position. Neither is a natural enemy of the other. Though not decisive, the almost flippant manner in which the Taiwan issue is being discussed in Europe adds to global risk of war. Europe has to be true to itself and maintain its stance on human rights and other issues. China will disagree but will not disengage. China may be able to play a helpful role in brokering a ceasefire in Ukraine after both sides have been exhausted by war. But we in Ukraine, we do think that China can influence Russian aggressors to think about what is going on naturally. It is going on to have finally Russia disintegrated at all, completely. We have to take into account also economic issues. In the international trading system, in particular the World Trade Organization, Europe can work with China to purpose reform so that the WTO can continue to function well. Statistically, China is still a developing country, but in many sectors like in electronic vehicles, shipbuilding, civil engineering, China is already a first world country. WTO rules, which were agreed to when China acceded at the end of 2001, have to be amended to take into account changes of the last 20 years. Between China and the US, the differences are too sharp for negotiations to be easily carried out. Europe can bridge the gap. China does politicize trade, but when doing so, it is careful to work within WTO rules. When countries take it to WTO tribunal, it argues its case carefully and in detail. It is in China's interest to have a properly functioning WTO. We have to understand also that now Europe is the main trading partner of China. Last year, the turnover between China and Europe reached the 835 billion USD. It is the first and the most powerful trade partner of China. That means for China, it is better to have Europe as partner than not to have. We have to understand all this. What else? Recently, European Commissioner Joseph Borrell, he made his visit to China. And when he was answering the questions of the journalists at the press conference, he used to several very important things. For China and Europe cooperation, is very much important that Europe takes China very seriously and we also expect to be considered not through the left hands of our relations with others, but in ourselves. That is Mr. Borrell's words. Because since the war in Europe, in Ukraine, Europe has become a geopolitical power. We started being a trade power after being an economic one. Now the war in Ukraine has converted us in a geopolitical power, not just an economic one, and we want to talk with China from its approach. Do not look at the European Union relations through the lens of the relations with others. Second message, just to tell clearly that for us, Russia represents a huge threat for our security and that we are committed to support Ukraine facing the Russian invasion and asking China to take into consideration its very tough position from our side, considering Russia as a security threat for the whole European Union. And then, that we have to rebalance our economic bilateral relations. We have a huge deficit that has increased 60% in the last year. And this should not be the consequence of just a competitive disadvantage between the European Union and China. It must be other structural reasons related with the market access encountered by European influence here in China. So, as we see, taking into account all these aspects, history, national traditions, way of living, the culture, etc., we have to understand one basic thing. Europe and China are not threats to each other, are not something which can be and should be in stable, negative relations. They have to cooperate, and we all need them to have been to be in close cooperation. Thanks very much for your attention. Any questions, please?
Thank you. I think question from Daria Nikarchuk. So Daria, please.
So thank you for this interesting lecture. So my question, so the European Union's cooperation with China, so has caused like some controversy even among European Union members. And there's also some rhetoric in Europe about the EU becoming like less dependent on the US. So we have heard also from some leaders in Western Europe. So could this like push maybe EU leaders and EU countries to engage, to cooperate with China even more than now?
I do think the different opinions of European leaders, from different countries of Europe, cannot be some kind of an obstacle for the mainstream. Because as we see now, say we take the Hungary, if you don't want to follow the united EU position, we'll do it without you. So every country has to build its own relations with China. China is actually going to be a good partner for everybody who needs cooperation. This 10-year initiative of President Xi, One Belt, One Road, is not only the way of forcing further the business economic expansion of China. It is given certain chances for every country which need something out of this project. If you want to build your bilateral relations with China this way, please. If you don't, please, it's your own decision. But if we're talking about European Union, then I do think that this is common approach. China is a partner, and China is supposed to be a partner forever. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the question from Elena Malayvan.
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture very much. My question is that you mentioned how it is expected for China to support, not support necessarily, but, kind of confront with the US approach regarding the Russia-Ukrainian war and be more merciful, so to say, for Russia. And in terms of EU relations, I think that it's a deal breaker for a lot of East European countries because for them, the matter of Russia demise is the national security one. And I remember that besides One Belt, One Road initiative, there was a specific initiative regarding Eastern European countries from China. It was like something 17 countries. And after such stance of China in terms of Russia-Ukrainian wars, a lot of Eastern European countries withdraw from this initiative. And I think the problem stands that China kind of lost the trust of a lot of Eastern European countries. And these Eastern European countries would use their influence regarding the potential trade with China and other partnership agreement, because they see China as kind of not a guarantee of security, but rather as potential threat in terms of their stance and their friendship with Russia, because we cannot ignore the fact that before Russia-Ukraine, a full-scale invasion of Russia, there was a Beijing Olympics and meeting of Xi Jinping with Putin, when Xi Jinping actively proclaimed the need for the new world order. And the other stance is that EU foreign policy is always grounded in human rights. And even in the new domain of diplomacy, the approach regarding artificial intelligence is also heavily grounded in human rights. And I think that it would be very hard for a big intertwined development regarding economical relations with China because of constant human rights critique. And we know, for example, Estonia has a crisis with China regarding the acknowledgement of alleged Uyghur genocide, and also the recognition of Taiwan, and the one who still kind of penetrate the human rights issues, even on like Tibet region and the abduction of Ganj Pajlana, is not the US official as much as European official. So what's your opinion on that?
On that, all of what you just enlisted, right?
I mean, I think it's a real challenge for development of EU-China relations.
Yesterday we had the meeting between President of the US, Joe Biden, and President of China, Mr. Xi. A lot of things were discussed over there. And first of all, and most importantly, they restore the military ties, which were broken last year, absolutely, to control the actual, maneuvers and actions of each side, to coordinate all of this, etc., etc., etc. Trade ties, many other things which can give us the hope that the relations between two most advanced, the mightiest economies in the world will be restored to the level they had several years ago. And this is, as I think, is it for the benefit of the whole mankind. Yes. I'm not sure that multipolar system is effective. I think that two-polar system is okay. China and the US. And the rest of the world have to take its own position in this new world. Like we had 30, 40 years ago, the Soviet Union and United States as two mightiest powers in the world. And everything was just circulating around this two poles. Now, according to my own opinion, as I know China, as I'm the expert in Chinese affairs for 30-something years, even more, I did traveled all around China. No, I don't now can tell you how many provinces I visited, but a lot, believe me, including Xinjiang autonomous region. Have you ever seen in Russian Federation the high-speed trains? No. I would like to say that in the future we will not see this. We see what is going on in Russia. People starving, people living without electricity, without gas, without everything. But in China, in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, they have high-speed trains. They have how do you call it? Green electricity, green energy structure, etc., 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 etc. I do think that we have now to understand that there are some kind of, what we call it, tales about how human rights are being, bad in China, how they, control over the population, etc., etc., etc. But believe me, people in China, they have very happy life. I saw a lot of faces. They are happy. I do remember 30 years ago, I've seen in main Beijing street, Jiangguomin Wai, thousands of people in the same uniform, traveling on bicycles, etc. A few cars, mainly with diplomatic license cards, etc. Now you can see absolutely happy people doing what they want to do. Yes, under control of the state, but this is wise control. And I do think that we have to recognize that China is a unique example of how to make reforms in very short and effective way in the world. No other examples, really. Did I answer your questions?
Yes, thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I see no other questions. So let me express our deepest gratitude for your engaging and informative speech, your insight on the topic of Chinese and European approach